when ArriveCan kicked off and when all of this was going on, but there was a lot of news about ArriveCan. Min was worried that either he or Jonathan Moore were going to get fired. So he was talking about somebody's head on a platter. And he said because Jonathan Moore had made a whole bunch of mistakes from an accounting perspective, talking about how much ArriveCan cost, it would go his way or it could go Mr. Doan's way because Mr. Doan was the CIO at the time. Then he turned. We were on the phone, but he stopped the conversation and he just said, you know, Cam, if I have to, I'm going to tell the committee that it was you. End of quote. Mr. Doan, in that section of his testimony, was Mr. McDonald telling the truth?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. I didn't brief Minister Mendicino on this issue. As I said, last year, there were no allegations.
I'm going to jump in there. I asked you a very simple question, and we've had you for almost 2 hours, and you've struggled to give direct answers to simple questions. And I'm not going to go off this one. In that section of his testimony, was Mr. McDonald being truthful, yes or no?
Thank you for the question. I am under oath, so yes, I am being very careful about my statements because I'm under oath. I understand what.
But you still have an obligation to answer questions before a parliamentary committee. You have an obligation to answer those questions, sir, and not doing so is contempt of Parliament. Again, were Mr. McDonald's statements truthful, yes or no?
Thank you for the question. I am trying to answer the question. So there are different elements of that quote that you read to me that in terms of what is truthful, in terms of what is engaging.
Were some elements of that quote untruthful then?
Last year, nobody was looking.
Are there any elements of that quote, sir, that are not accurate?
I can get that in writing. Can you repeat the quote for me?
Sir, the quotation, I have limited time, and the quotation was directly from Mr. McDonald's testimony. You heard it. Was
Mr. Generous, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. Please repeat the quote. I will allow the extra time. And Mr. Doan, I'm going to just read from you, right from witnesses, for swearing of witnesses, procedure and practice. It states, refusal to answer questions or failure to reply may result in a charge of contempt. This has been repeated to you several times today. There have been a lot of direct questions, and I normally don't do this, but there have been very specific questions, and we'd like very specific answers. Taxpayers deserve that. Canadians deserve that. Parliament deserves that. Mr. Generous, I'm going to turn it back over to you if you want to repeat the quote, and I will not take away your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. The quote is as follows. I believe Mr. Mendicino was not happy. Mr. Mendicino wasn't there when ArriveCan kicked off and when all of this was going on, but there was a lot of news about ArriveCan. Min was worried that either he or Jonathan Moore were going to get fired. So he was talking about somebody's head on a platter. And he said because Jonathan Moore had made a whole bunch of mistakes from an accounting perspective, talking about how much ArriveCan cost, it would go his way or it could go Mr. Doan's way because Mr. Doan was the CIO at the time. Then he turned. We were on the phone, but he stopped the conversation and he just said, you know, Cam, if I have to, I'm going to tell the committee that it was you. End of quote. In that section of his testimony, sir, was Mr. McDonald being fully truthful? Yes or no?
Thank you for the question. No.
Which parts of that quotation are not true from your perspective?
So I've written them in order. So the first one, Mendicino not happy. I would not know that. I would not be privy to that. So I don't know where Mr. McDonald got that. I'm not saying that it came from me. It did not come from me. I was not briefing the minister in the minister's office. Number two, I was...
Let's jump in on that point specifically. So you're saying that you didn't have a direct conversation with Mr. Mendicino, but did somebody else tell you that Mr. Mendicino wasn't happy, and did you relay that information to Mr. McDonald? Because he all he said is that you said it. Did you in fact say what he says you said?
I do not recall saying that Mr. Mendicino or any relayed information would have come to me. And at that time, that was not the concern. Can I answer number two and three?
Do you recall at any point, do you recall being told at any point that Minister Mendicino was not happy?
Thank you for the question. No, I do not recall that. Can I answer two and three?
Could you go on with the other errors in his statement that you believe were made?
Number two, either I or the CFO would be fired. I had no fear for my job this time last year. I stand behind the decision. I think it's value for money, and I don't think at any point in time I was afraid for my job. I don't think a public servant doing their job, delivering on something like a Rivecan, would be fired.
Okay.
And
did you at any point tell Mr. McDonald that you would tell the committee that it was him who made the decision?
Thank you for that. I did not threaten to blame him, and I was here a week or two. I was here on October 24th, and I had an opportunity to do so with all the allegations around his name, and I still did not do so.
So you're suggesting that this conversation between you and Mr. McDonald is entirely fabricated?
Thank you for the question. I did have a conversation with Mr. McDonald. I did reach out to him. There's evidence of this. I reached out and asked him for facts and data because he was there at the time. I did have the conversation. The point of the conversation was help us understand who invited GC Strategies into Rivecan at the first time. We absolutely did have a conversation.
Okay, but these various particular points you're saying are not accurate. With respect to the minister's office, did you have any information shared with you about the perspective of the minister or the minister's office in relation to this procurement?
Thank you for the question. I do not recall anything from that perspective, or from the minister's office, or from the minister, and I was not briefing the minister on this topic.
Did you receive any direction along these lines regarding Deloitte, regarding the selection, regarding how people felt about it from Mr. Osowski, Ms. O'Gorman at any points?
I do not recall getting any direction on any of these matters. In terms of technical direction, this would not be something that a deputy minister would normally get involved in.
Okay, so to summarize your testimony, you were given two options. You knew that Deloitte was behind one of the options. You did not know that GC Strategies was behind the other. You chose the option for the company that involved a company that you weren't aware of. You don't know who made the decision regarding GC Strategies. You at no point heard from or consulted with your bosses within the department. And Mr. McDonald fully fabricated significant aspects of your conversation with him. I find that testimony quite unbelievable, frankly. But that's what you have to say?
Yes. And that is our time, Mr. Genuis. Perhaps Mr. Doan, you can get back to us in writing on that. Mr.